Good evening. On behalf of SFU's Alumni Relations team and the Alumni Association, I'd like to welcome you all to our first ever virtual wine tasting. We have an exceptional group of alumni and guests joining us this evening. It's wonderful to know that we're in community with so many. For this particular event, we had over 450 RSVPs. And if you've had the opportunity to attend any of our online sessions, you'll know that one of the unique benefits is that our online programming is now accessible to more alumni than ever. And this evening is no exception, as we do have RSVPs from outside of BC and across Canada. So it's great for all of you to join us this evening. For fun, I would encourage all of you, we've got a chat box at the bottom, just to see where everyone's from. I'd encourage you to drop the city name of where you're attending from, so you can see just kind of the broad range of who we have in the room this evening. By way of introduction, my name is Nicole Dorssers. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at SFU, and I have the distinct honor of serving as this evening's host. This evening, I'm joining you from downtown Vancouver on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, where I have the privilege to live, work, and play. Before I introduce our speaker, and we can get to the fun part, drinking wine, I want to highlight a few points that will make today's session run smoothly. For those of you who are new to Zoom webinar, you'll notice that your microphone and video capabilities have automatically been turned off, so you've got nothing to worry about. We've taken care of that for you. But you can still communicate with us in a couple of different ways. If you're having any technical difficulties or need assistance, please use the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the event as well, we encourage you to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of the screen, or you can virtually raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and unmute your mic to speak. If you want to test that out now, you can see the raise your hand feature. And I just asked to see if a few people want to give that a demo just by raising their hands. I'm going to look at the participants tab now. I'm seeing a few different hands go up there. That's awesome. Great. Alrighty. And throughout this session, we're also going to be launching some polls for you to take part in. If you've logged in via the browser, you may not be able to see these, but that's okay. We're going to share the results out. So to get started and to test out the polls, let's start with a question to get us all started, and who you're attending with tonight. All right, so I'm seeing some responses here. Family, partner, Zoom crew, pets, friends, alone. All right, okay, great. It's good to know who we've got here. All right. Perfect. So I'm seeing actually, it looks like we have a pretty good tie between partner and alone. So this is awesome. It's good to know. And I love to see too that we've got lots of people attending with their families, pets. This is fantastic. Awesome. All right, so now that we've gotten the hang of it, let's do one more in the spirit of fun. What wine are you? All right, so if you were a wine, what type of wine would you be? We've got white, red, rosé, champagne, prosecco. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of reds. No wonder why the attendance was so high this evening. All right, rosé, champagne, white. Just a few seconds remaining there. All right, and with a landslide, 60%, we've got a lot of red wine drinkers, so it's absolutely the right event for all of you. I'm so excited to get started and learn a little bit more. So with that, just a couple more comments from me. Before we begin the session, it is going to be recorded, so you're welcome to revisit and take a watch later. And lastly, we will have a prize draw at the end, so we encourage you all to stay on. I'm pretty biased, but the gifts are awesome. So we do encourage you to stay on so that you can participate in that. And with that, I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Valerie Tait. Is a practicing hands-on viticulturist and winemaker in the Okanagan. Val has been in the wine industry for almost 3 decades. Valerie Tait brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to her role as general manager and winemaker for Gold Hill Winery. Her analytical focus started with undergraduate training in molecular genetics and plant biochemistry at SFU. And then she went on to earn an enology and viticulture degree from the University of California, Davies, Napa. Involved with a number of the iconic wine producers in the Valley, including Poplar Grove, Painted Rock, and Bench 1775 Winery. Val brings an artisanal approach to wine growing, focusing her skills as she comes full circle to now create small lot, handcrafted wines from fruit grown at the exceptional Gold Hill Estate Vineyard. Welcome, Val, and with that, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Nicole. It's very lovely to be here, and I'm very excited about sharing a glass or two with all the participants. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that we can share the evening, and I'd like everybody to be as engaged as possible, and so I'm not the only one talking. I would like to hear from everybody out there, and also how lovely that we're getting together when we've had such a chaotic and crazy week and year. And, you know, polls, you're very brave to throw polls out there, because I think everybody's got kind of polls on the mind in maybe a negative way, but regardless, yeah, so hopefully you can give me some information on what you're looking for with me speaking with you, and maybe just to give me an idea of where you're at. I would love to know how many people, I'd like to launch a poll actually, how many people have had any kind of formal wine tasting? If you could answer that for me, and then I can kind of gauge what you're looking for information. Oh, quite a few of you. Oh, that's cool. Kind of evenly split. Nice. Oh, that's great. Okay, that's very cool. So yeah, we're gonna have fun tasting wine. Has everybody opened up their bottles of wine? I hope they have, and are able to kind of let it breathe, and then now tasting the wine. But I'm gonna have a sip right now, actually, to taste the wine.
Val, it smells amazing, actually.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to tell you, I chose this wine. 2013 was my first real involvement with the winemaking at Gold Hill, but I've always been involved with this family with the viticulture side, or the growing side. And I picked this vintage in particular because, you know, it's a 7-year-old BC wine, and it's very rare to try a BC wine that has had some age. And so I thought it'd be really interesting for everybody to see what it's like to try a wine that has that was built actually to be an aged wine and to be enjoyed as an older wine. And also Cabernet Franc is my absolute favorite varietal. I think it's a varietal that could set us apart in the world. Like, we globally can produce a wine that really stands up and can be very kind of discerning and iconic in the world of wine, because really we're not just competing in BC, but we're competing in the world. And, you know, BC wine drinkers are the most spoiled wine drinkers. They get to drink wines from all over the world. But I guess the participants that are here tonight are probably from all over, not just BC. So it is, you know, we do in BC have a luxury to be able to access so much wine. Yeah, so if you've ever gone to formal tasting, the first thing is to look at the color of the wine, and you know, you recognize right away it's a red wine. That's and sometimes you can hold it up against a white piece of paper, and you can see the differences between a young wine and an older wine just in the way the color is against a piece of paper or something that's white. And you can see how the red changes from a super bright cherry red to a garnet or brickish red. So that's a first indication of an aged wine. But what you'll notice most especially is the aromas and the flavors of the wine are really well integrated. It's kind of like when you cook a stew and you let it sit over time, the flavors just meld together. You can't really differentiate all the different components. You just taste it together like an integrated whole. And so with this wine, even though it went into 100% French oak, brand new oak, and the fruit was quite well developed with big tannins, it's very smooth and cohesive, and you can't differentiate wood or fruit or individual flavors, just kind of a melding of lots of flavors. So that in a nutshell is the tasting of this wine.
Oh, that's fantastic. Val, I have a quick question. So you'd said that there was some, that it's hard to find an aged wine in BC. Why is that?
Well, a lot of the demand is very high for BC wines, and we're a very small producer in the world. There's only 2 bands in the world where you can actually produce wine grapes, and we're at the very northernmost extent of that top band, northern hemisphere band. And so we're at the limit of being able to grow. So our acreage that produces grapes is very small, and the industry is about, you know, almost 30 to 40 years old. And in that time, wine consumers have grown, and so they've really come to enjoy BC wines and purchase BC wines. And the demand is so high that wineries have a difficult time holding back wine and allowing them to age before they sell to the consumer. So you'd have to start your production with that goal in mind and deliberately withhold the wine and not sell it until it's 4 or 5 years old, which is what we do at Gold Hill. So by doing that, we feel that a wine buyer can get that wine and it already has that age. You don't have to put it in a cellar. It's ready to drink, and you can enjoy the secondary flavors that come from an aged wine, which is so interesting, so much more than just the more simple primary flavors that we often enjoy with BC wines.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm seeing here just in the Q&A, we actually do have a comment about the alcohol volume in wine.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about that and how that kind of comes to be? And are there some that are higher than others?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we're very lucky that, well, this wine, Cabernet Franc, came from Osoyoos. And I'm not sure if visitors or the participants have had a chance to go to Osoyoos, but it's one of the hottest regions in Canada. And it has the least amount of rainfall. So it's a very dry, hot place in the summer. And what happens with wine grapes is that they develop a lot of sugar during the growing season. And with that development of sugar comes the potential to produce alcohol. And so the riper the fruit, the higher the alcohol. And with the reds, especially down from Osoyoos, they are pretty bold, big wines with big alcohol. If you're growing them in another region of BC or in a cooler climate anywhere else in the world where the sugars don't accumulate very much, you get lower alcohol wines. So it's, you know, sometimes you can just look at the alcohol and get an indication of how big and bold that wine's going to be. And this one in particular, sorry, I have to look at the label because it's been a while since what is this one? This one is 15.4. So 2013 was actually kind of a moderate year. It wasn't a hot year, but we've gotten as high as 16.5%, which is like California standards.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of hours of sunlight in the summertime, so we've got huge growing potential, lots of potential to accumulate sugars.
Oh man, we've only just started and I already feel like I'm learning so much. I'm also seeing, I'm loving all of the questions that we're getting in the Q&A. So Val, I might look through a few of these.
Yeah, please.
And then go into some of our other questions, but I love one that's coming from Joanne, where she's asking about what type of glass is optimum for a Cab Franc. And this is something that personally, I've had lots of questions about because I've done the tumblers, I've done the stemless, the stems. So tell us, what really is the best for enjoying this wine?
Oh, well, show us your glass first. Yes, the tumbler.
I've got a nice little crystal tumbler here.
Yeah, and I have this is a classic. So basically, I feel like you can enjoy the wine and whatever glass you enjoy drinking it out of, because really it's a personal experience that you want to have with the wine. But technically, there are actually glasses that are built for Cab Franc, the Bordeaux glass. And the presentation is meant to give a huge amount of headspace volume and kind of a tight opening on the top so that all of the aromas and everything get trapped in the glass. And it gives you a huge amount of room to swirl without spilling. But that's if you're technically wanting to assess the wine. But if you want to just enjoy it, I love a tumbler. It's rugged. You can slam it on the table. You can enjoy the wine. You don't have to be so careful. But yeah, technically this is the typicity of the glass that you would use if you're going to enjoy a Cab Franc. But yeah, you can drink it out of it. I've drunk it out of coffee mugs camping, so it still tastes good.
It's good to know that everything's an option. I know for myself, I just can't seem to keep nice, delicate wine glasses in one piece. So tumblers seem to be the go-to for me because they just are a little bit more durable. But with that, Val, I would love to learn a little bit more about you, and maybe you can share with all of us tonight how you went from your kind of scientific background as a student at SFU to what you're doing now. How did that journey kind of take place for you?
Wow, yeah, that's a really convoluted trail. First of all, I want to say when I was in university, I had no idea that this was a possibility for me or that it even existed as a job. And, you know, for Simon Fraser, I really enjoyed my education. And when I went to Simon Fraser, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea, but the climate there that the school was just so open-ended, and it was really amazing for someone, I'm a very curious person, and I could really pursue what was interesting to me. And I felt like the professors and the courses that were offered were stellar, and really kind of capturing my imagination and my curiosity without having to pigeonhole. And so I was able to have a very broad science-based education in biochemistry and find my way into plant biochemistry, which is what I really wanted to specialize in. And when I graduated, I actually followed one of my professors to the Okanagan to a government research station where I worked in research. And I was madly writing grants to get funding because there wasn't funds available for me to get hired. So I was self-funding by writing grants and doing experiments. And I found I absolutely hated being in a lab. That was my life. But I didn't know that that was going to be my life. And yeah, at the same time, there's a winery here called Nicole Winery. I don't know if your participants know about it, but the founding winemaker was doing research at the research station to dial in winemaking and wine growing. And we were at a social, and I was drinking what I thought was great wine. It was white Riesling, sweet, Blue Nun. Maybe people know it, Blue Nun. They're all Black Tower's an equivalent one. And he came over and sniffed my glass and threw out the contents of my glass, which nobody throws out alcohol. So that got my attention. And then he poured this beautiful wine from Burgundy, an Alsatian Riesling, and said to me, the only difference between what you were drinking and this is the winemaking. It's the same grape, same part of the world, but the winemaking and how they grew the grapes made all the difference, and that immediately captured my imagination. And at the same time, when I was working at the research station, I started working with grape growers who would call me and they'd say, I have grapevine viruses, and I would go out to their vineyards because I was studying grapevine viruses. And inevitably, it would not be a viral disease that they were dealing with. It was nutrition problems or growing problems. And so I started advising growers, and I really enjoyed them. And so it was kind of like I discovered wine, and all these things came together, and I found that there was actually another whole world that I could get into. And so I slowly moved, well, it wasn't so slow, it was pretty quick. I moved from what I was doing to working with growers, and then I realized I needed more education, and then I went to UC Davis. So that was the long route that got me to where I am. But I have to say that I had the confidence from my background to recognize that, hey, I want to do this, and I had the foundation. And really, that foundation has held me instead because it helped me with my winemaking, helped me with wine growing. It was a fantastic foundation that really is solid. So gave me the confidence to move into this industry, and I never looked back. It was great. I don't know if somebody told me, if I was an undergraduate and somebody said, hey, you could be a winemaker, I'd be like, why would I want to do that? I wouldn't have had any interest, but it's kind of just organically evolved. So I feel like, all the young people out there, they can just relax and don't worry. It'll come to you.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love seeing how you've connected all of those dots too, and especially the reference to Black Tower. That was one that I do remember from growing up, and it was often in like the basement fridge, which you would pull out, for company. So I can vividly remember the bottle actually, which is hilarious.
I know, the same. With wine drinking though, it's a one-way route. Like once you start to evolve your taste and recognize what you like, you can never go back to what you used to drink. So yeah, it's a constantly evolving thing. It's fantastic. I mean, wine is such a fantastic thing. It's a journey.
Absolutely. And I'm loving the enthusiasm in this Q&A. So let's reference a couple of these. I'm seeing a theme here around the flavors of wine. I'm seeing some questions about how the oakiness gets brought in, how the flavor profiles develop, and also there's some great questions too from, I believe, Clara, in terms of how we should know when we should open a bottle in advance to open up those flavors. So could you share with us a little bit kind of on that development process and how we should prepare to enjoy our wines as well?
Yeah, that's a really interesting, actually I was talking with another winemaker, actually my partner who's a winemaker also. We were talking about that, and it's really interesting because wine is one of those beverages where you taste, like we all have a journey of food, and mostly food, but also other kinds of sensory experiences that we have when we grow up. And scent is so tied to memory, and we remember things like we'll smell something and it's so emotionally evocative. And it's interesting because wine has so many different flavors and components that belong to other fruits, sometimes to things like herbs, or like tree scents or dirt scents, or mushrooms, things that are not related to wine at all, but yet they come out in the wine. And it's so interesting because I think that's why it's captured people. And as people get older, they gravitate more and more to wine because it kind of captures all of those emotional memory sense. And to enjoy them, like, really everybody has a personal preference, and they'll find a wine that they enjoy. And every wine has its own signature profile of aromas and scents. And for me, I really love, like with the winemaking that I do, I love to make wine that's kind of close to the air. So when you're making it, you exclude oxygen. And what happens is when you open that bottle is the first time it breathes. That's why I was asking everyone to take the cork out of the bottle, because the wine is a living thing and it actually needs to breathe. And it has all these components in the wine that want to breathe. The minute you pull the cork out or you undo the screw cap, the wine starts reacting with oxygen. And the best thing of all is when you pour a glass of wine and you sit down to a meal and you have your glass and it's open. And what's happening with the wine is it's reacting with air and it's changing. And so the more hours the wine is open, the more time it has to react. But even in a glass, just by swirling it, it starts to change. And it's an incredible journey when you're having a meal and every sip, the wine is changing and it's reacting with your meal. It's a incredible, like for me, that gives me goosebumps. I think that's the most incredible thing about wine. So that's very interesting. But for most people, I think it's just their own personal preference. If they can find a wine that they enjoy, they like the flavors of, maybe that wine needs to be drunk right away as soon as you open it so it stays fresh. But most reds will benefit by being open. Unless it's like something like a very inexpensive red, then you'd want to drink it right away. I don't know if that's helpful.
I think that's very helpful. And in fact, I'm seeing more questions. So I'm loving this enthusiasm. Everybody on screen, please keep coming up with these questions because they're fantastic. And Val, you shared a little bit about pairing of wines with different foods and how they can really explore the flavors and bring them out. One of the questions was, with this particular wine, what would you kind of suggest it be paired with? I know I've got a little bit of prosciutto here ready. But what, with this particular wine, what would go best?
Yeah, anything with tomato, anything that would be thyme-based, like chicken and thyme, because it really picks up on those aromas. It's a medium weight wine, and so it can be easily overpowered by food, but anything that's got kind of a dried herb approach, like ratatouille or pizza, goes fantastic with it. Anything that's got a tomato, like bolognese or pastas with tomato base, go very, very well with it. So it's a really nice thing to pair. But it doesn't have to be an exact pairing. It could be something that you just enjoy the wine and the food. It doesn't have to be a marriage. It could be just a date. So you don't have to be a full commitment. But basically anything that's tomato based would go so well with this.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. And pizza's always a win.
Pizza, yeah. Pizza, yeah, bruschetta, that's a very good choice. You knew. That's good.
I love that. So with this, you've shared a little bit about the wine and how we can open up the flavors. Can you share with us maybe what a day in the life of Val is like at Gold Hill?
Yeah, it's that's a big encompassing thing and it changes all the time. But today, for example, I was in the cellar. So I've kind of gone full range with my work, where I started in the cellar and in the field being very hands-on. And then I kind of grew into more and more management positions and kind of was more removed and making the decisions about things, but not hands-on. And now I've gone back to being hands-on, and it's like such a pleasurable experience. So today I was in the cellar, and one of our first wines, a Merlot, was finished, and we were pressing it. So separating the wine from all the skins and seeds. And that's the first emergence of a 2020 red wine. That's the birth of it right there. So that happened today, and that's very exciting because that first wine is the first real impression of what the 2020 vintage is going to be like. So right now, at this time of year, it's kind of crazy and hectic. I'm in the cellar every day for 12 hours, and it's like canning on a giant scale. So it's very process driven, and it's messy and wet, but lots of smells and tasting. I'm tasting wines all day and spitting, of course. And so once that's done, then I move into strategizing what we're going to be doing with wine, like holding wines back, releasing wines, which wines we're going to sell, which ones we're going to hold back, and then moving into strategizing for the upcoming sales year and tourism with our tasting room. And so it's quite a large, kind of a cyclical thing, so it's focused on production right now, but then it'll move into how we handle the fruits of our production in future. And for me, it's always been really important to be full circle so I could control the quality of the wine and never worry about losing the quality of the wine and how it's going to be released or produced.
That's fantastic. That's good to know. Because so it seems as though maybe every day is a little bit different as there's different phases you're working through.
Yeah. Even when I wasn't so hands-on, it is really different because the wine industry, it's very interesting because when you're not in the industry, a lot of times people interact with wineries and they come to the tasting room or they see the wine on the shelf and it seems kind of very static, but there's always a busy time year round, whether you're focusing on sales and customers or if you're focusing on production or you're focusing on wine growing. So it's super interesting because basically every 3 months it changes completely what your focus is on and what you stress about. So that's a big reason why I've really loved being in the wine industry because it's never the same. Like it changes all the time. And, it's very dynamic. Like we have challenges, whether it's climate effects or COVID or, competition from around the world. It's super interesting. So it has very many facets. It's a great industry to get into. It's a growing industry. There's a lot of demand for it too. So I'm just going to put a plug out there for every facet, especially on the sales side, the customer service side. There's hospitality. It's incredible. It's very dynamic.
That's great. Speaking of change, we all know that 2020 has thrown one at us. Have you noticed anything, like any notable changes in the wine industry that have, positive or negative as a result of the pandemic?
Well, we as an industry were very worried at the beginning of the season, thinking most of our customers are retail stores, restaurants, hospitality, people who sell food. And so we were very worried as an industry. And also we didn't know, and everybody went into lockdown and it was very scary. So we were all terrified. But the interesting thing is we were deemed essential workers. So basically we had to work right through. But we're a very small team and most places are pretty small during the winter time because you're just dealing with production. And then we got kind of instructions on how to open the tasting rooms and how to deal with the public. And we kind of took our time. I wanted to really understand it. And we finally, as an industry, developed protocols that made it very safe. And we kind of we were like the duck paddling like mad underwater, but customers would come in and they'd feel oh, it's super chill. Because, people are coming to see us, they're on holidays. And we wanted everybody to have a very beautiful experience, really enjoy themselves. And so it went really well. We had no issues, but we were so busy because BC people stayed home and went to wineries. And there was a lot of people who came who'd never been to a winery in BC before, which is really interesting. I was super surprised by that. So yeah, we ended up having a super busy year.
That's fantastic. And actually, I see a great question here from Phil in the Q&A section. He says, with big groups picking up many of the small producers in the Okanagan, how do you survive as a small winery?
Sorry, what was the question with big groups? Oh, with consolidation?
Yeah, I'm making a bit of an assumption that that's
right.
The question.
It's a really good question. basically, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the family that I'm working with, I've been working with them for over 20 years, and they're a long line of farmers who were fruit farmers, and we purchased a property when it was Poplar Grove. We purchased a property from them to turn into a vineyard, and it was the first time that they had been exposed to the idea of wine growing. So they planted the vineyard for us, and then they got super excited about getting into wine growing. So they actually have 85 acres of vineyard that is in 6 different locations throughout the Okanagan Valley. And 90% of what they produce is sold as grapes. And then the 10% that they keep forms the winery. So I'm in a very lucky position that I can choose whatever fruit, and like really I've got the pick of the lot. And we are focusing on premium production, and for that we really rely on people coming to the winery. So it's an artisanal approach, and we have a loyal following of people who come and seek us out. So it's kind of like people become our family, and then they support us. And so you just got to find your tribe, and then they will support you. But if we were to go out into the world and just put our wine on the shelves, like, people, it would be like, who are they? We've never heard of them. They're too small. We don't know who they are. But that's not where we sell our wines. We sell our wines from the winery. So for us, it's very important that we meet people who like our wines, and we engage with them and hopefully bring them to us, because our production is very small. We're only doing 3,000 cases, so it's tiny. And it really is all about relationship.
Well, that's great. And it's great to see that there was such enthusiasm about learning about red wines tonight.
Yeah.
So talking about community and engaging and sharing, I think tonight's a great example of that. And I'm actually seeing some, again, great questions from our audience tonight. A few questions actually are coming up around the legs of wine and what that means.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So legs refer to when you swirl your wine in the glass, and if everybody wants to do that, you can actually, this wine is doing it quite well, but you'll see that there's the liquid climbs the glass and then it comes back down, and there's 2 processes that are happening. The first one is when you swirl the liquid and it goes up, it's predominantly a water-based liquid, but it also has alcohol. So when you swirl to the top of the swirl, the alcohol is evaporating because now you've created a very thin layer. And so as the alcohol evaporates, the liquid that's left, gravity drops back down into the glass. But another thing, and this is most recently what they found, is that when you swirl, as the liquid goes up, it's like a shock wave. It hits the top of where you have kind of cohesion or capillary action, hits the top of the edge and then bounces back, and gravity helps to pull that back down. So it's 2 processes that are happening, but it's really interesting, and you'll see people do this who are technically tasting wine, and the reason for that is that the alcohol lifts all of the volatile molecules that give scents and lifts it up so you can smell it. It presents it in the top of the glass. So the more vigorously you do that, the quicker you'll release those. It's hard to do it in the air. You have to put it down on a table. You can't see, but I've got it on a table and I'm swirling it like mad, and it really just opens up the aromas like crazy.
So on that theme of aromas, again, as we're doing the swirling, and I'm getting lots of questions now about the different tastes. Some of the questions were, what are some of the kind of primary aromas that we should be sensing at this point? And also there's another question that I'm going to kind of pair together, is around the different textures and layers of the taste.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so that's from Katie, who was asking about the textures, layers, and then we've got a few asking about the different primary aromas that we should be sensing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first, the aromas, there's a lot of floral notes that would be like violet and some dried thyme, and there's a little bit of like lemon rind in there. And then in the flavors, there's often a descriptor that talks about wine, red fruit versus black fruit. And red fruit would be like red currants, raspberry, red cherry. So there's definitely red raspberry and red cherry in the fruit flavors, as opposed to something like a Cabernet Sauvignon, which would have dark fruit, which would be more like blackberry, brambleberry, blueberry, getting into the dark blue. So it's a really big difference in in flavor components. But yeah, so those fruit flavors, the floral, which is very violet, and then the thyme, the dried herb, and then lemon peel, and then getting into the red currant, raspberry fruit flavors. When you talk about texture, there is some wood notes in there which are very integrated, so you wouldn't pick them up as oak or woody. But what they do is they give a bit of fullness to the mid palate. So when you taste the wine, it hits your mouth in different parts of your different places. So on the tip of the tongue, the side of the mouth, and then the back of the throat. And the more bright flavors are the front of your mouth. But when you get into the deeper flavors, they create texture, and that's in the side and the back of your mouth. So that's what gives the impression of fullness. And a lot of that comes from the tannins and the oak, which meld together and give like, it's not thickness, but it feels like thickness, gives it depth and weight. So this is a medium weight wine. It's not a heavy weight. It's not a big body, big, bold like a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's medium weight. So it's present and you can feel it in the middle of your mouth, but it's not like, boom. You could still taste things when you drink this wine. Did that answer the question?
I think so, and I have a follow-up to that, just out of my own general curiosity. Talking about the different areas where flavors kind of come up, is there a specific way that, you know, we're smelling the wine, we're swirling the wine in the glass? Is there a specific way that we should, you know, once we're drinking it, actually be tasting it? Is there a process that we should go through?
I think, well, if you want to be technical, yeah, you should be aware of like tasting it in all parts of your mouth. So I'm going to be a little bit rude, but you know, to be really get everything. You pull it into your mouth and you suck air when you do that. And what happens is it aerates it in your mouth and you get a very big, so if everybody wants to try that, put some in your mouth and pretend you've got super hot soup in your mouth and you need to cool it off, and just suck air through your lips without spilling or drooling. And that really, the first thing you'll notice is it really volatilizes the alcohol, but it also brings out all of the styles and esters, the aromas. It really hits the top of your roof of your mouth where your scents are. So you pick up a lot of, and it also gives you a sensation of the acid, which is right on the tip of your tongue, and then the tannins, which coat the back and side of your tongue. Yeah, so it's a really good way to get taste. Some people actually like swish it in their mouth to get really full sensation, but I think aerating it is the best way because it's a bit more delicate with the wine.
Right. I'm actually seeing here that we've got a few different questions that actually reference aerators and their use. Do you have any thoughts on that? Are they a great tool? Is it better to let wines breathe? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, like if you rushed home and you were a little bit late and you were having people for dinner and you didn't open the bottle of wine an hour before dinner or 2 hours before, then an aerator is fantastic. Or say you have a wine that you bought that's 2018 or 2019. So 2020, I mean, literally it was just made, it's a baby, and you want to take a bit of the rough youthfulness of it away, an aerator is fantastic. Or a wine that is maybe just a young wine that hasn't had any aging and you want to make it ready to drink right away. That aerator is fantastic.
Okay, so I'm seeing that it's a good tool to have in our kind of wine tasting toolbox, something that we can use when necessary. I'm also seeing a few questions here, Val, around the aging of wine.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, with my winemaking, I'm always looking for, the decision for making a wine starts in the vineyard. So you're walking through the vineyard and basically I'm tasting fruit literally every day in some blocks when they get close to picking. And there's a certain profile that the fruit's going to have that's going to be, it's going to signal to me that it's fruit that's ready to be picked and processed to be made into wine that has ageability. And when you make a wine using fruit that developed for aging, when you first make that wine, it's undrinkable. It's super tannic and it's very harsh in your mouth and very spiky. Like as soon as you put it in your mouth, it's going to react with your mouth and not be very enjoyable. But that wine has all the components that it needs to evolve over time to make a beautiful wine for aging. So it's a very different process, making a wine that's ready to drink in 2 years versus a wine that's ready to drink in 4 or 5 years. So it's basically it's how it's made, when the fruit is picked, and then how the wine is made. And it involves like a very extended fermentation, long time in barrels, and then long time aging in bottle to make it ready to drink.
Oh, that's great. Speaking of bottles that are ready to drink, we've got a question here from David that I can also see has been like championed by a good amount of our audience here as well. So a lot of curiosity around what your top 3 favorite BC wines would be.
Like BC wineries or varietals?
Just different wines. So I think
Oh,
take any and
wow.
all suggestions in terms of BC preferences, and there's a little bit of a theme here.
Yeah.
One of the questions from David was around your top 3 favorite BC wines, but the next question to that's from Paul around your favorite BC wineries. So possibly those could be coupled together.
Oh, wow. That's really tough because, you know, I like for me, wine is so in the moment. Like, where am I? Who am I with? What am I eating? Like in the summer, I can't even think of drinking red wine. And then it gets to cold weather and I can't even think of drinking white wine anymore. So I try to taste as widely as I can. And every winery, basically, I can say, has a wine that I would love or I have tried and I've loved. So I feel like it's really hard to say what's your favorite wine. I mean, it's just so Cabernet Franc for sure is my favorite varietal. I'm so in love with it. I love everything about it. And outside of that, I drink so many different wines. Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc are my 2 favorite. But you know, like I've been drinking a lot of Chardonnay this past week, so the thing that is fantastic is that we have so much diversity of BC wines, and really you just can find explore, go out there and explore. And for me, it just changes depending on the weather and what I'm eating, who I'm with, when I'm drinking. If there isn't an election that I'm waiting for the results on, it's going to be a very different wine than, if it's the summer and I'm at the beach.
That's great. Speaking of things we cannot control, I actually see a very interesting question here from Rory that's been championed by quite a few in the audience, asking about the forest fires.
Oh,
And has that impacted our vines here in BC, and possibly how so?
yeah, that's super interesting because it's a very high profile, thing that's in the news and everybody hears about it. But there's a molecule that actually causes smoke taint, and it's so random in its expression. And the best information we have is in the fall when the grapes get ripe, they have a waxy coating on the grapes. And that molecule seems to be able to get adsorbed onto that waxy coating, but it's very random. So as an example, in 2015, we had a lot of fires, and in one of the vineyards I was working with, the fire came right to the edge of the vineyard, flames, burning. We had to water the vines down. And none of the vines in that vineyard had smoke taint, but a vineyard that was 5 kilometers away, the fruit was in the same stage of development, 1 block, and it was Cabernet Franc, developed smoke taint. So it's so random. And sometimes that smoke taint comes across as like more of a toasted effect. So it could be like you use barrels that had more toast, and it can be something that works with the wine, or it can be like licking an ashtray. Literally, it tastes like I don't know if you were a kid and you ever snuck a beer when your parents had a party or a drink and there was ashes or cigarette butts in it. That's what it would taste like. Literally like that. So it's kind of random and unpredictable, but we've never had more than 1 to 2% of grapes affected in any year, even in really bad smoke or wildfire years. So yeah, I mean, California have a bigger problem because they've been having massive fires, and I mean, where it obliterates the sky. So this year they've had to write off a lot of vineyards. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a growing problem. We're aware of it, and we're trying to. You can actually test for it now before, like when you first bring in the fruit and you crush it and you make juice, you can't taste the smoke taint because it's not soluble in water. But as soon as you make alcohol, it's soluble in the alcohol, and you can taste it. And by then it's too late. You can't really do anything about it. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Val. That's, you know, especially now with so many things that we seem to not be able to control. It's always great to understand the impact
Mhm.
that they do have. And I see we have a question. We've got Ryan who has his hand up. So I believe one of our tech team in the background is going to unmute you, Ryan, so you can ask ask your question.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're getting some individuals on audio. So this is just going to take a second to get everything connected. Just waiting for some confirmation there. Oh, and maybe in the meantime,
Uh-huh.
oh, I see that there's just an issue there. We also have a question from Annie who has her hand up. Okay, there's just, if you've got your hand up, Annie, we've asked to unmute you, but you do need to accept that request. So I think with that, just in the interest of time, we've got another question here in the Q&A from David, asking about what types of wine have the lowest sugar.
Oh, that's very easy. The cooler the region that the grapes are grown and the less time that it spends hanging on the vine, then the lower the sugar, lower the alcohol. But if you get wines that are dry, they will have no sugar at all. So if somebody ferments a wine to dryness and it's low alcohol, that's going to have the lowest sugar. So if you're, I'm guessing might be keto related, or if you're trying to have consume things with very low sugar, because alcohol is also a sugar, then the best thing to do is get white wines from a very cool region. So BC actually produces some lovely white wines that are around 11 to 12% alcohol, that are dry, no residual sugar, and those have very low sugar levels. German wines are also, Austrian, anything north and cool.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And in the interest of time, I have no idea how we have flown by almost, and I know we have to wrap this up soon. But Val, I have a few questions for you. Actually, I know that you may have something exciting on the horizon in terms of a new wine venture. Could you share that before we part?
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. My partner, he's the founder and winemaker from Poplar Grove Winery, and he retired like 3 years ago. And you can never stop making wine. He started making wine actually at 76. So, Jesus, makes us sound like we're really getting older or getting up there. But we've been wanting to do a project together just because we've had so much times making wine and exploring and experimenting, and we often we either agree or disagree, but we're very passionate about those discussions and the intellectual exercise. And so we've started a wine label called Two House, and it's basically Two Houses is the two of us coming together, but we also are sourcing fruit from the family, the Gold Hill family, the Gill family, who we've been sourcing fruit from both individually in each of our own careers for over 20 years. And so it was this beautiful project that just brought us together. And we've been talking about doing it for years, but we started it 3 years ago. So we have two wines now that we've just bottled, and we're very excited about it. But every year we're each going to make a wine, and sometimes we're going to agree about the process, and sometimes we're going to disagree about the process. So this year we're both doing a Cabernet Franc that's completely different, and it's from the same vineyard block. So it's just the intellectual exercise with it is fantastic. We're really enjoying it, but very small. We're doing all of the work literally with our own hands, and we don't work that hard. So it's only about 40 to 100 cases that we're doing of each wine.
That's great. So when would we be able to get our hands on some of those?
We're in the process of launching our website, and we'll have those wines available this fall. Like within probably about 3 weeks, we'll have them available. But tiny production. It's like so small. We have right now we have two wines, and they're less than 140 cases total. So very tiny.
Well, congratulations. That sounds very exciting. And I have no doubt you'll be applying a lot of what you learned at SFU to this new venture as
Oh,
well.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah,
and,
totally.
and actually see one more question here from Claire. And it actually is very fitting as we're wrapping up this wine tasting and kind of putting can we say putting the cork in it as we come to the end? There's a question about how one should, and this is not necessarily an issue I seem to face because bottles of wine always tend to disappear around me, but if one was not to be able to finish a full bottle of wine, what's the proper way to store that so that it can be enjoyed again?
Yeah, the ideal thing to do, a lot of people think you should put it in the fridge, you know, because they don't want it to get contaminated, but wine actually has very high acid and low pH, so it's very microbially stable. So the best thing to do is leave it on the counter, because the colder you make that wine, the more gas goes into it, so the more oxygen goes into it, so you'll oxidize the wine. And then the next best thing is there's this beautiful product that you can buy, which is argon gas in a can, and you just give a little spritz, and argon is very heavy, so it lies on top of the wine, and it's a way of protecting it. I know that there's devices where you can plunge and it pulls air out. That's actually not good because it pulls all those beautiful volatile aromas and scents out. So it's better to put a gas or leave it without gas and just put a cork in it, or better yet, finish the bottle. That's the best.
So I've been doing the right thing all along.
That's right. Yes.
Great. Well, Val, thank you so much for sharing your evening with me. Well, with all of us. I feel a little bit selfish because I've been able to ask the questions, but there's so many more in the chat. I know that everyone's been exceptionally engaged through this. And again, just thank you so much for sharing your time and answering all of these questions. And I'm sure that we're going to have to do this again because there's a plethora in the Q&A that we couldn't get to. But Val, again, sincere thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody too for sharing a glass.
Awesome. And with that, thank you everyone for your fantastic questions. Again, we couldn't get to everything, but we thank you for your understanding and hope you do enjoy and share the recording of this that will be posted at a later date. Before we wrap up, we do have one final poll to launch. We do hope you enjoyed the session this evening. And if we were to do a similar one, we'd love to know what you'd be interested in. And so for this, we won't be sharing the results, but we will be using these behind the scenes. So please do go ahead and fill that out. We're always looking at creative ways to kind of meet the interests of our alumni, and we really do appreciate you sharing. Our next events that we have upcoming, we have an Ask Me Anything event happening on November 12th at 5 p.m., which is going to be an informative session with 3 of our alumni speakers from PayPal. On November 18th, we're also excited to have President Joy Johnson at our first official alumni event with her and her role, which is going to be focused on mental health through times of adversity. And we do hope that you're able to attend. All of the information is going to be put into the chat for these upcoming events. We also have a very fun event coming up on December 3rd, which is going to be a mystery event titled Who Done It at SFU Mystery. And again, we do hope you're able to attend. These will be great opportunities to connect with one another. And I know myself and team are very excited to have all of you there, as well as our Alumni Association who supports all of this great work. And with that, we are going to announce the winners of our prizes. So our first prize is donated by Gold Hill Winery and is 3 bottles of different vintages of the Cab Franc. And this prize goes to, and I'm just going to announce these here, and you will be contacted following the event. So the first prize goes to Paul Medea. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us. And our second prize is going to Brenda Lee Saski, which is some SFU wine glasses. So again, they'll go great with your next bottle of wine. And our third prize is going to Stephen Holdcroft. And again, those are SFU wine glasses. So again, those will be wonderful to enjoy your next bottle of wine. And the Alumni Relations Office will be in touch with you to get those prizes to you, and we can't wait. So with that, I just want to thank you all. Thank Valerie for sharing her time with us this evening. Again, thank you to all of our alumni who were able to attend from across the country. We've had individuals from all over, as well as the behind the scenes team. These events are not easy to put together, and they really do take a village. So a sincere thank you to all of our IT staff, our ceremonies and events teams, our meetings and events teams, and our alumni relations team. So thank you all. And as a final note, we will be sending out a survey following this event. It only takes a quick 2 minutes. We would ask that you fill that out. It helps us learn about the types of experiences that you're interested in. So we do hope that you complete it. And with that, I hope that you all have a lovely and safe evening. Have a great night.